Alright, so I just went and saw The Hunt, and I didn't like it. Which is probably not a huge surprise to you. As you've seen so far, not a huge fan of Blumhouse films. But much like how I respect Tyler Perry for somehow being able to put as little money as possible into these movies and making a whole bunch back, I'll say it till the day I die, Blumhouse is great on return on investments. And this movie's no different. I genuinely think just about nobody was gonna go see this film if they didn't do things how they did them.
The last I heard, free speech still exists.
Don't First Amendment me.
It wasn't real.
If everyone from the beginning knew that this movie was going to be a dumb comedy horror, I don't think it would have made any money. I don't think anyone would have felt compelled to go see it. It's not a sequel, it's not a reboot, it's not just a cheap, popcorn horror movie. So that first trailer was cut a very specific kind of way, and I think that to an extent they probably got a little lucky that there was a big hubbub about, oh, they're making a movie about going and killing conservatives. So that gave them the opportunity, and again, grats to them for striking while the iron was hot, but it gave them the opportunity to go and pretend like they were canceling the movie, give it a little bit of time, bring back the movie, and now, because it's all over the news cycles, I got caught up watching it tonight instead of Bloodshot. Although I have a feeling that no matter which movie I saw tonight, I would have felt like I wish I had seen the other one. So here's the deal. The movie is pretty much what we thought it was. Boiled down to its most reductionist kind of view, it is ultimately about liberal elites who are rich going and kidnapping one flavor each of different kind of conservatives, and then kind of playing the most dangerous game. Which, on an aside, one thing that's kind of weird about that is that part is played way down. There's definitely a world where the movie could have been mostly them being hunted and kind of this like Rambo First Blood situation of them going back and forth. But just trust me, it's really not. Most of the carnage and death that happens in the movie is way front-loaded, and we get down to just a handful of characters very quickly. But what's kind of weird is for having such a charged concept, the delivery really takes all of the fangs out.
I'm playing an Arab refugee, but I identify as white. I think that's problematic too, in some way.
I had no strong emotions in this entire movie. It mostly wants to be a black comedy, but I didn't necessarily find it hilarious. I got a couple of chuckles here and there. And if it wanted to hide a deeper meaning behind a bunch of comedy, then it really failed because there's no allegory to be had here. They're just talking about the exact thing.
What kind of sick people would even think of something like that?
White people. We're them worse.
But because it's undercut with this kind of comedic tone, plus the fact that all of the characters are legitimately just cartoon characters, any kind of deeper messaging or something that you could walk away with is totally lost. I feel like a big hypocrite with this movie because if someone like Yorgos Lanthimos wants to make a movie about how people treat people in the second half of their life who are single, then he'll build an absurdist world that is just about that.
Did you read the leaflet?
Yes, I did.
As you understand from your brother's experience, if you fail to fall in love with someone during your stay here, you'll turn into an animal.
And that helps to really force you to look directly at those themes, right? So I should have liked this movie for a similar reason. All these characters are the most extreme, like literally it feels like a cartoon world on the liberal side or on the conservative side. But ultimately what it does is it pushes it so far into the cartoon area that I just don't even relate to any of these people. I'm like, these aren't people that we interact with. Rush Limbaugh is not as extreme as some of the characters in this movie. Rachel Maddow is not as extreme as some of the characters in this movie. So if there's no subtlety and there's no nuance, I mean, maybe that's the thing. I think a better version of this movie would have been one with a very serious tone that showed that when life and death now became on the line, that these characters found themselves having more similarities than they thought. There's a conservative character who, again, has seen people die, he's being hunted, he knows he's being hunted, and he gets on a train and he sees a bunch of illegals that are on the train who are trying to get into the country, right? Even though the stakes are this high and he knows that he's being hunted by people, he spends the next 20 minutes ranting about how these people are crisis actors.
They're actors.
Cartoon character. On the flip side, there's a girl who's with the liberal group. She ends up taking an arrow to the stomach, and when someone puts a gun to her head and asks, hey, do you think that you should be saved just because you're a woman? She says, of course not. Cartoon character. In a more serious toned version of this movie, we could have had it where the conservative had these really strong opinions about immigration, but when he actually came face to face with some real people, it humanized them, and then he softened up. And then when the liberal girl, takes an arrow to the stomach or whatever, all of a sudden gender politics don't really feel all that important anymore because life and death is at stake. And we could have had an interesting meta commentary about how the reason we get to think in these kinds of extremely crazy tribalistic ways are because our life is really easy, and if we were to simplify things, then that would actually give us better perspective. But none of that perspective gets put in this movie because, again, these people are completely wooden. They are cardboard cutouts at best.
You actually believed we were hunting human beings for sport. But you are.
So ultimately, there was all this hubbub about this movie for nothing because it's really a gigantic nothing burger. So seriously, major props for those guys figuring out how to get everybody all worked up over a movie that's really just kinda stupid. But Blumhouse absolutely gets my award for hardest working people in the game.
Work ethic.
I think 80% of the movies I've reviewed this year have been from Blumhouse. Anyways, thanks for watching. Till next time. In movies, you unlock visual and audio components, so it's more efficient to tell your story using those. And in video games, you unlock controllers. If the rule in movies is show, don't tell, then the rule in video games is do, don't show. So why is efficiency so important? Well, because if